Hello, DawgNation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation looking at a big-time recruiting win for these Georgia Bulldogs here a mere matter of moments ago. Daniel Calhoun, number 15 player in the state of Georgia, according to the 24/7 Sport Composite ranking. Also, number 98 nationally, and the number 8 offensive tackle, or I should say number 6 offensive tackle, made his decision to commit to Georgia a moment ago. This was an intense recruiting battle won by the Dogs. And obviously it sets up Georgia on a little bit of a hot streak lately, specifically when it comes to offensive line recruiting with the pledge from Michael Uini going back to Friday. So a lot has been going on here as of late with this Georgia 2024 class. Calhoun, certainly a monstrous prospect at 6'6", 335 pounds. Big, definitely back in style with this Georgia offensive line. We've got plenty to talk about with that. Jeff Sentell will be a part of this here in a moment live on video with DawgNation. But as a kind of a special thing here, you talk about Calhoun, who kind of made his bones initially as part of a Centennial program. Let's bring on another former Centennial Knights great here, and Connor Riley, to give you an idea of just how big of a deal this is. Connor joining us from his vacation on the heels of the Calhoun commitment. He wanted to talk about what Georgia adds here. He's obviously got a close connection to this family there as well. Connor, how does it feel as a former Centennial offensive lineman to see a player like Calhoun getting a chance to further his career? Now, he's at Walton High School, of course, now, but getting a chance to further his career eventually at the University of Georgia. What does this mean to a Centennial alumnus such as yourself?
I'm not gonna lie. I'm supposed to be like an unbiased, objective reporter. This is so freaking cool. I played with both of Daniel's older brothers, Vincent, who was an offensive lineman who went on to play at Minnesota, and Chris, who's a defensive end that went to play at Wake Forest. This kid comes from a great family. They have been through the college system. They know everything that is stepping into and what that means. Centennial, it's not a great program. They don't produce a lot of high-end talent. And so for this kid, and obviously Daniel, going to Walton, I think he wants to win a state championship. And I think that matters to him. And I think that speaks to the level of character that he has and how important winning is. And we hear so often Kirby Smart talking about the value of winning and wanting those type of guys in this program. I think from a culture standpoint, Daniel Calhoun fits everything that Georgia looks for in this program. And I think, just as a Centennial alum, as a guy that played with his two older brothers, it's a really cool connection piece to have there. And as far as what Georgia is getting, I mean, look, it's not a great offensive line class, but this is a guy that I think can play either guard or tackle. Reminds me a little bit of both Xavier Truss and Kate Ratledge in that he wanted to develop him that way. He can be a tackle, but ultimately I think his long-term home might be guard. You mentioned it earlier, and I'll have something on this when I get back from vacation next week. I mean, this Georgia offensive line class that Stacey Searles is putting together, when Mark Richt was the coach here, you were lucky if you were getting an offensive lineman that was around 300 pounds coming in.
Yeah.
Now it almost feels like a prerequisite that they have to be at least 330 pounds to really, to catch Georgia's eye. And obviously there are some outliers there, but they continue to really beef up on this offensive line under Stacey Searles. And they land Michael Unui on Friday, beating out Michigan and Alabama. They beat out Alabama and Texas to land Daniel Calhoun. They've got two more targets that are announcing later this week. I know when Stacey Searles was hired as the offensive line coach, there was a lot of, hand-wringing about would he be able to recruit. I think so far with what we've seen both in the last cycle for Georgia with them landing Monroe Freeling and both Hughley, and then this cycle with Calhoun and Unui, Stacey Searles is answering any questions anyone would have about him in terms of what he is as an offensive line coach.
Yeah, I talked to John Stinchcomb about this on Monday. Obviously, there were questions being asked by fans when Stacey Searles was hired, and I will admit I was probably one of the ones asking some of those questions too. But kind of the point you're bringing up here is he is emphatically answering those questions. And by the way, beautiful beach backdrop that you have going on there. We're certainly all very jealous of that. But in all seriousness, Stacey Searles is emphatically answering these questions right now at a time which I believe that offensive line recruiting may be more important than it's ever been before because of just how few great linemen seem to be available in the transfer portal right now. These are guys that you hold on to, and you do everything you can to keep them. Georgia seems to be stocking its coffers as well as anybody is right now, and I think that is to Serrell's credit here that, Kirby Smart has shown himself to be capable of going out and getting the diamond in the rough, the young coach that nobody knows anything about. In this particular case, when it comes to a guy like Stacey Serrells, it's also going down the road of a more veteran coach who has some experience. Maybe Georgia fans don't have the best memories of his first time there at Georgia. But Kirby Smart, I think, sort of getting an indication of if this is a guy that Smart trusts to be on this staff, then he's going to carry the full weight expected of an assistant coach, because that is exactly, to your point, what Stacey Serrells is doing right now.
Yeah, I think you touched on the most important part of this there. Go look at Ohio State and what they're saying about their offensive linemen right now and how they had to go out into the transfer portal and try and address some of the concerns there. Offensive line is the one position we know there just aren't enough capable bodies to come in and play at a high college football level. And so if you're able to land these guys as recruits and develop them over time, I think that gives you a tremendous leg up, obviously, assuming you're able to keep them in the program. But you look at even this current offensive line that Georgia has, yes, they're stacked. Amarius Mims, Tate Ratledge, Cedric Van Pran, and Xavier Truss coming back. I mean, if I'm Auburn or Florida, I would kill to have a guy like Dylan Fairchild or Micah Morris on my team who would probably start at both of those schools. And those guys are content to continue to develop at Georgia, to wait their time, to get better under Stacey Serrells. And so I think it speaks to really the ability of Georgia to continue to identify great offensive linemen and, most importantly, continue to land them in recruitment for the second straight year. Georgia, and really third straight year when you count Amarius Mims back in 2021, Georgia has landed the number one offensive lineman in the state. They landed Hughley a year ago. They landed Amarius Mims in 2021. And now this year they go out and they land Calhoun, a guy that, again, Alabama pushed really hard for. Texas, which Steve Sarkisian, we'll see how it goes on the field with him this year. They've made an effort to try and get better along the offensive line. And for Georgia to go in and win a battle like that, one, I think it speaks to the level of caliber of a prospect that Calhoun is. But two, it just speaks to the job Georgia is doing in terms of identifying offensive linemen, developing them during their time in college, and then turning them into pro prospects.
Let me also say this, too, and this is one of those things that Georgia fans sort of care about, even though they know that ultimately it probably doesn't matter sometimes much we make a big deal about it. But it's also kind of keeping pace as well with the elite in-state prospect. We have seen some evidence that maybe some of the biggest names in the state are going to go elsewhere this year. There's been talk of Edric Houston going to Ohio State. Mike Matthews, the wide receiver from Parkview, he's likely to go somewhere else other than Georgia. And, obviously you can't get all of the big names in your state, but this is coming on the heels of a cycle a year ago in which you saw the Caleb Downs and the Justice Haynes going outside the state of Georgia there as well. Georgia's clearly an elite recruiting power. A lot of that is national recruiting. Georgians like to see Georgians going to UGA there as well. So there is the element here that Daniel Calhoun, a top 15 player, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite here in the state, a guy like that choosing Georgia, there's a little extra emphasis on the part of some fans when you go out and win a battle like this with one of your guys in state as well.
Yeah, certainly. I think with this class in particular, look, like last year, it was not a great year in the state of Georgia in terms of top-end talent, in terms of recruits in this state. I believe only 4 top 100 overall prospects. This year there are 14, and maybe even higher than that. There's obviously been some ranking adjustments that have been updated there. But, look, maybe there's something in the water in Gwinnett County. Look, Daniel Calhoun's a Fulton boy. Us Fulton boys, we like to stay home, go play for the home state university. So I think that plays a big part in that there as well. But, so much of how we talk about the rest of this signing class, like Georgia's going to sign a number one overall class in this cycle, provided, Dylan Raiola, Ellis Robinson, all the guys that already have committed remain committed, and Georgia takes care of business the rest of the way. It's more how high historically can this class climb? And I think to get this class as high as it possibly can, it's going to have to hit like some of those in-state targets. I think Daniel Calhoun is absolutely a big checkbox to mark off now. Getting that is a massive win, especially when you look at who else was recruiting him. And so, spinning this ahead, it sounds like the ship has left the harbor on Edric Houston, but Georgia's still going to battle for Mike Matthews. KJ Bolden is set to announce August 5th. And there are a number, Cam McKell down there in Statesboro. There are a number of in-state targets that I think if Georgia closes on, can really make this A class, because it's clearly already going to be that with 22, 23 commitments now in the class, already the number one overall prospect or class in the cycle. If you land these in-state kids, you put together a truly all-time class where you are both combining the ability to go recruit out of state and land guys from all over the country, which Kirby Smart has documented time and time again. It's important, while also mixing in enough in-state kids that, for every, Keely Ringo and Darnell Washington, and you have guys like Lad McConkey and Javon Bullard, who, as cliche as it sounds, to those guys, it really does mean more to play for their home state school and to go play for Georgia.
Yeah.
And so I think to have a nice, healthy mix of that is a big thing for Georgia to have in this number one overall ranked recruiting class.
All right, Connor, great stuff. We're going to let you enjoy your vacation. Thank you so much for stopping by and being a part of what we're doing here on DawgNation here today. And when you return, obviously, we'll look forward to reading plenty more from you there at DawgNation.com as well. And enjoy that vacation time, that well-earned time there at the beach.
Yep. Before I let you guys go, I just want to give you a shot of the Atlantic Ocean. I'm up here in Montauk, New York, just enjoying the day, having a great time at the beach. So thrilled to be able to hop on to talk about a Centennial Night alum and another big recruiting win for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Connor, great shot. Appreciate that. And it is a good day for former Centennial Night. It's here today. Connor Riley being one of those there. That is a lot of fun. We had a little bit of a thought that we might be doing a video here for Daniel Calhoun, and Connor actually surprised me the other day. He said, yeah, listen, there's no way I'm missing this video because he does know the Calhoun family well, has played with some of those older siblings, and even from vacation wanted to be a part of this commitment video here today just because of the pride that he has and what Daniel Calhoun, the young man that he's become, and obviously on his way to there to University of Georgia now. And it is a reminder, for me, I know some players and their families more so than others, but when you have these close connections, one of the things you are reminded of is the players that go on to play for Georgia are real people. And, a guy like Daniel Calhoun may be larger than most real people, but he is still a real person with a real backstory, and he's got a family that has raised him, and he's grown up alongside other siblings. And, his life, growing up to the point where he is now is not all that different from what ours is there as well. And I think that's one of the things that continues to make college football really special is it's made up of our next-door neighbors and guys that we maybe went to school with, or, these are, people that are very closely tied to the communities that we grow up in, the communities that we live in. And that's one of the things that I think continues to make college football really special. And in Connor's case, that's a tie with Daniel Calhoun right there, and a fun way to celebrate all of that. Now, as a part of this commitment special here, breaking news on DawgNation, Connor Riley does not plan on being the only guest we have on for you. We're going to hope to talk to Jeff Sentell here coming up in just a minute there as well. And obviously, Jeff will share his thoughts here on specifically what Calhoun brings to this 2024 class for Georgia. And I think he'll sure echo the point that Connor and I made, which is a very valuable addition along the offensive line, quite a hot streak that Georgia has been on, going back to Ewing on Friday and continuing possibly even beyond this with Daniel Calhoun. But also specifically, kind of about what this means for Stacey Searles, and I'm sure Jeff will echo plenty of those points. But in addition to that, I do want to get into more detail with Jeff about specifically what the next few days can be like for Georgia. When Jeff was on our show this time a week ago, because he actually, on DawgNation Daily, he actually appeared on a different day than normal last week. He was on Wednesday. He kind of laid the gauntlet down there at that particular time of keep your eye on a series of decisions coming up over the course of the next few days, all of those having the potential of going Georgia's way. Well, so far, based on Jeff's kind of prophetic statement last week, Georgia is 2 for 2 right now with the expectation of more to come. And eventually this sort of expands beyond offensive line there as well. As Connor pointed out, we did learn some news that KJ Bolden, the 5-star athlete, really a defensive back at Georgia, but the 5-star athlete KJ Bolden now knows that he'll make his commitment decision on August 5th. There's obviously lots of other eyeballs out there for what could be going down with other positions there as well. Some of this may be a reverberation after Justin Scott, defensive lineman, chose Ohio State the other day. So we are moving into a July time of year that's going to be the offshoot of all of the activity that took place during June. The recruiting cycle, the recruiting calendar has really kind of moved up over the course of the last few years, kind of prompted by the early signing period where early summer, more important than it's ever been before. A lot of these warm weather official visits taking place now in a time when years ago these would have been reserved for the winter time of the year, the late end of the recruiting cycle. All of that's been accelerated. All of that's been moved up. June was every bit as busy as you thought it was going to be, and now you'll kind of find out what kind of trophies can Georgia collect when it comes to recruiting wins after what they did in the month of June. Well, thus far, it seems like the month of July going to be very good to these dogs as promised. All of you tuning in across all of our video platforms. We're very happy to have you here as we react to the news coming out just a moment ago that Daniel Calhoun, 24/7 Sports Composite, ranks him as the number 98 player nationally, so a top 100 player overall, a number 6 offensive tackle, a number 15 player here in the state of Georgia. Calhoun now a part of this Georgia class in 2024, and a lot of Georgia fans very excited about everything kind of going on there with that. Paul Moon says, yeah, these are big linemen. Yeah, it seems like for a little while that the smaller, quicker offensive linemen might have been kind of in vogue at Georgia, and some of that may have been because that's just what was available in the likes of a Broderick Jones, or maybe that's what Matt Luke, when he took over as Georgia offensive line coach, maybe that's what he would have preferred. Obviously, the early days of the Kirby Smart era, that was dominated by Sam Pittman when Georgia was going out and getting the biggest human beings he could find. It seems like for a while maybe Georgia was kind of interested in a little bit different kind of offensive lineman, if that was ever true. Georgia is seemingly back to its roots here because the guys it is bringing in as of late, these are giant men. I've got Daniel Calhoun at 6'6", 335. That's obviously a beast of a man. And, clearly when you look at what has led Georgia to win the last 2 national championships, you can make a long list of things that have contributed to that success. Obviously, a lot of that credit has gone to the Georgia defense, and rightly so. But I think the most unheralded, underrated aspect of all of that may be the Georgia offensive line, a big catalyst for offensive success that ranks the Bulldogs on that side of the ball near the very top of the country. Georgia has had great offensive line play, expects to be great again here this year there as well. And the recruiting results of the last couple of years, the last couple of days, would certainly seem that future years' success well insured there as well. I believe we're going to catch up with Jeff Sentell now here coming up in just a moment. Appreciate your patience on that. While we do, I'll take more of your comments there as well. As folks kind of weigh in on all this, Greg Rosenberg, very happy about what Georgia's getting. I saw a comment from him a little earlier. He said, hey, just on the basis of bringing Uini on Friday and Calhoun right now, that would already be, he said, a very good haul along the offensive line. But when you think about what else is out there, all of a sudden this has a chance to be a historic pull for Georgia there along the offensive line, to go along the likes of which you can make a case that Georgia had a historic pull with inside linebackers a year ago. Maybe had a historic pull with defensive backs and cornerbacks in particular with the previous 2022 cycle prior to that. That it seems like in different years, Georgia sort of staked its claim to kind of a historic group at various position spots, and maybe it's the offensive line's turn to have that be true here right now. So we'll see if that continues to play out there in 2024 there as well. Greg also asking about a running back that could join up with these guys. Well, listen, I think there's some interest out there potentially that another impressive running back could join this 2024 class for Georgia here certainly very soon. TN Dog over on DawgNation.com, he's celebrating the good news today, as well as Rambo is there as well. So a lot of Georgia fans feeling very good about this and looking ahead to future decisions, the likes of which of Nate Frazier, the running back from out in California, and all the other stuff that could go along with that in the days ahead. There is certainly a lot of excitement around this 2024 recruiting cycle for Georgia. If you're just joining us, the news that prompts us being on video here today, 4-star offensive lineman Daniel Calhoun started his high school career at a Centennial in the Atlanta area, now a part of the powerhouse Walton program, and he's also going to be a part of the Georgia class here in 2024. Joining us via phone to react to this as well as our DawgNation recruiting insider, Jeff Sentell. Jeff, let's bring you in on this. We heard from Connor Riley, who knows that Calhoun family very well. Older brothers had a chance to play high school football with them. He's certainly thrilled on behalf of Daniel to be a part of this Georgia class in 2024. How about for Georgia fans who are also wanting to know more about what Georgia's getting here? A little bit of a hot streak on the offensive line as of late. What does Daniel Calhoun, though, specifically bring to this Georgia class right now?
Yeah, guys, hey, congratulations. I think you hear the echoes of fireworks. That's the reason why. It's going to be a pretty cool thing for the next, few weeks or so. It's kind of funny. I asked a lot of people around this decision. And, Brandon, we have to go back in the DeLorean at 88 miles an hour and go back to 2020, the summer of 2020. That's when Daniel Calhoun was a rising ninth grader. He just graduated from middle school and was heading to Centennial High School. And that's when former Centennial coach Sean O'Sullivan got a call from Kirby Smart that told him that Daniel Calhoun was offered. And for the Calhoun family, that was big because Kirby was in there first. Brandon, can you even imagine how much different college football is now compared to the summer of 2020 when no NIL, no transfer portal, and it was an old-fashioned get your foot in the door first, relationship building, early engagement that did it. And as much as people want to talk about, hey, NIL and official visits, Daniel Calhoun told me about this decision, because he said he knew he was going to be a dog when he saw Georgia click off the back-to-back national championship. He wanted to be a part of that, and he wanted to be a part of more of that. And back in January the 10th, you know, we always talk about these ripple effects of big games and big crowds and big moments. Well, that championship there had already secured a future road grader for the class of 2024 who's going to make Ryan Puglisi's ribs and Dylan Raiola's ribs and backs and vertebrae feel so good over the next 4 or 5 years.
What about the overall trend for Georgia offensive line recruiting, where if you want to go back and look at the last couple of cycles, you know, you get Ernest Green, and that sort of made you feel better about that group. You get Monroe Freeling a year ago. That sort of made you feel better about that group. It's almost like Georgia was sort of, I hate to say it this way, but from the perspective of some maybe, doing just enough to sort of stay at the elite level. You really needed the one big prospect to kind of make you feel better about the overall group if you care about rankings and things like that. It seems like there's a lot more pizzazz maybe to this crop of Georgia offensive line prospects, the ones that have committed, the ones that could be joining up there as well, where Georgia seems like it's potentially on the verge here, Jeff, of going on the kind of run with this spot this year, almost like it did with inside linebacker a year ago, or maybe cornerback the cycle before that, tight end seemingly every year. It seems like the Georgia offensive line recruiting is sort of getting its turn in the sun right now. Is that sort of your perspective on this?
Yeah, it is, and more than that, Brandon, it's spirit the courts, I guess, is a little bit you're going to see there where, like, these guys don't care. They've been told that Georgia might lose 5, 4, 5, 6 offensive linemen off this year's team. So they know Stacey Stirls has some openings, and he knows he has some room to fill. And he's filling it with a lot of massive human beings. I asked Daniel, I was like, you know, the typical recruiting question follow-up, like, now you're a dog, ask it still to be a dog. What are you going to do next? And he's like, who do you want to recruit next? And he said his next guy was Marquez, Big Easily, and that's the guy who has a decision coming up on July the 8th. They're not worried about, you know, hey, am I the best dude in this class? Am I the highest rated dude in this class? I love this point about Calhoun in terms of, you want to talk about this period, Brandon, where you have 2 weeks, and Georgia is trying to they've got decisions from 7 of the 11 offensive linemen they hosted on official. Brandon, they've already gotten 2, and you look at Daniel Calhoun, he's 6'6" and some change in socks, and he's about 356 pounds right now. Brandon, Georgia already has 2 offensive linemen committed in this class that are bigger than him, like taller. Marcus Harrison, taller. Michael Looney, taller. Like, it is amazing to see the mass of humanity. If you guys want to go on DawgNation.com, I was able to get a picture from the family of Daniel Calhoun last year, next to Warren McClendon, Amarius Mims, and Cedric Von Tron. And Daniel Calhoun kind of makes those DGDs, those back-to-back national title ring holders, he makes them look rather pedestrian. I won't say small because that would be inaccurate, but kind of average, you know, Trip and Grits average by comparison.
How about the fact that it seems like it's going to be a pretty busy week here for Georgia recruiting there as well, at least with fans' eyes on targets and decisions, and we'll see what kind of good news follows what's already been a pretty good last couple of days with Ewing on Friday, now Calhoun right now. What can you tell us about what the next few days might look like for Georgia recruiting here? You mentioned, obviously, Marquez Easley, big-time, you know, top 200-level prospect, getting ready to make a decision here coming up pretty soon. But how about beyond that? What can we kind of have our eyes on here for the next few days?
Well, so you've got published scheduled announcements coming from Nair Daniels. That's the big man out of Bergen Catholic in New Jersey. That decision is coming on July the 7th. It was originally scheduled for July the 4th. He told me he wanted to back that thing up because he wanted a little bit more eyes on it. He wanted a little bit more views, a little bit more attention on the message. He didn't want it to get lost in between hot dogs and fireworks. Right around this time of year, we know that Joseph Jonah Ajanye, the talented defensive lineman out of Texas, had talked about how he wanted to make his decision on July the 12th. You also have Marquez Easley out of Kankakee, Illinois. That's a Chicago suburb who visited Georgia on the first weekend in June, had set his official way back in February, and he'd also, Brandon, I know you love stuff like this, some cool theatrics. He had said a top 3 maybe a month ago, and Georgia wasn't in the top 3, but the information that we lean on tends us to believe that Georgia's still right in the thick of that as well. And you've got a stretch here when it talks about Michael Looney and Ethan Callaway, and now Daniel Calhoun, and potentially Nair Daniels, and Marquez Easley, and J.C. Poe. The names go on, where Georgia's in the thick of a lot of these recruitments, and their offensive line class could potentially be done by the second week of July.
Yeah, really pretty amazing. And I guess the last thing for me on this, we'll find out if you've got any parting thoughts you want to leave us with, but over the course of the last few days, we have seen the 5-star Georgia quarterback commit Dylan Raiola certainly cheerleading plenty for the UGA decision on Friday, previewing the Daniel Calhoun stuff, really encouraging him to join them there at Georgia. But privately behind the scenes, how much of a factor has Dylan Raiola been in all these offensive linemen who are either poised to potentially join Georgia? We'll find out how true that ends up being. Or in the case of Calhoun and UGA, guys who have gone public and made their pledges known here. What kind of factor behind the scenes has Dylan Raiola been in any of this?
Well, Brandon, he told me back in L.A. in Redondo Beach that he said he's probably made 75, 80 phone calls, texts, FaceTimes, and what have you in terms of wanting to build this class, wanting to have the best class around you, Brandon. And I think the main thing, the big picture thing I want folks to know is this gives Georgia 10 top 100 commitments right now, and we're not even one day past America's birthday in terms of this class. 10 top 100 commitments. But here's the really cool part when we peel another layer back. 5 of those right on the offensive side of the ball, which was so much needed for this class. 5 future offensive players inside the nation's top 100. Georgia has the nation's #1 class. Georgia has another guy from the state of Georgia, an in-state homegrown prospect for the class as well. So you just keep stacking a lot of these things up. And you've got Georgia now with 23 public commitments. And they've got a lot of beats. They've got a lot of guys on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And that's what's different right now, Brandon. Spectacular class.
I guess I lied. I will ask you one more thing, too, because one of the things I mentioned on DawgNation Daily today, going back to the story that you had written about Calhoun kind of previewing his decision at DawgNation.com, I believe you published that on the 4th, was the fact that, Daniel said, listen, there are a lot of schools I took official visits to that kind of rolled out the red carpet and had a lot of glitz and glamour and things like that. But ultimately, his decision was going to kind of come down to, hey, who develops offensive tackles? Who prepares me for the NFL? It's really kind of more of a nuts and bolt, brick and mortar type thing in terms of the decision he was going to make. And the point that I guess I made on my show today, leading into the Calhoun decision we just heard, is that, it sort of feels like, from a personality standpoint, that he's the kind of player that I think has a chance to thrive at Georgia because, based on the quotes that he gave you, seems like he's interested in the right things.
Yeah, the main thing here is development. He thought relationships were really key. He liked the way Stacey Searles can develop guys. I think his father, Vincent Calhoun, gave me a really appropriate term for what he calls him the beast. But it's an acronym. If you guys will read the acronym in the story, it means blessed, effort, successful, attitude, toughness, all those words spell together, beast. And this is a guy that's a hard worker. One of the things that Walton High School coach Daniel Brunner told me is he had to lose some weight. He had to get him ready to play college football one day because he was already a phenomenal prospect. He's going to play some both ways for Walton High this year, Brandon. That means some defensive tackles. That means getting in some really good shape. He's the left tackle right now for Walton. As big as he is, he's never stepped out of a drill. He's never backed out of the work. And this is one of those guys that is an effort player, a humble kid. It's really just about the work, Brandon. And the Dogs certainly can use a lot of those as talented as Daniel Calhoun right now.
All right, Jeff, final thought for you before we let you go. Georgia gets a big one today. Daniel Calhoun. Any final thoughts to leave us with?
I got a funny one, man. I got a final thought. I was about to be on the phone later today, and I'm so very happy that Daniel Calhoun made his decision around lunchtime rather than around sunset or around the evening. Sometimes these recruits have special places in your heart for just different reasons. And the fireworks came at high noon today for Georgia's 2024 class.
Indeed, that is the case. Jeff, we'll look forward to reading more from you about this at DawgNation.com, catching up with you on DawgNation Daily on Friday, and, of course, seeing you as a part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger on Wednesday, your own show there as well. Jeff, thank you so much.
Yeah, Brandon, appreciate you, man. Hey, happy holiday weekend. I'm glad we got Connor on there to share that connection to the family as well. That's good stuff.
All right, no doubt about that, Jeff. Appreciate you for sure, and as I said, look forward to plenty more of you as the week rolls on there. So to wrap things up here today, breaking news coming via DawgNation. Daniel Calhoun, number 15 player in the state of Georgia, now at Walton High School, the number 98 player overall in our country, and the number 6 offensive tackle overall, making that pledge to Georgia official. Georgia on a hot streak when recruiting, especially when it comes to the offensive line, with Jeff saying there could be more to come in the days ahead there as well. Stay close to DawgNation. We'll have all of that for you. And thanks to Kaylee Manziel, our producer, for getting us on the air here today. And we will look forward to talking to you back here again soon.